Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is April 2nd, 2020, and we are now going to go ahead and continue our slides. The slides are going to be titled Interdependence Part 2. You will see this uploaded onto your classwork page in your Google Classroom. This will be an assignment. There will be an assignment link to it, and you will see the assignment link to it in the page. Nevertheless, we will go ahead and do a quick review. So last time in our last lesson, we learned about food chains and food webs. We said that a food chain was a hierarchy of animals that are classified based on what it is that they eat. We stated that a food web is, or basically are multiple food chains in a specific ecosystem that represents all the animals in a given ecosystem and where they sit in terms of their hierarchy or level. We explained that a hierarchy is essentially a system where you have the top or dominant animal at the top, and then animals below and below and below until we get to plants, but I'll get into that in a second. We discussed producers. Producers are basically animals that feed, or are basically plants. So producers are plants, any plant out there. If it's a grape, if it's a peanut, whatever it is a producer. Producers are vegetation, and producers are organisms that feed from the sun. They utilize the sun as energy, and they transform the energy that the sun provides them into food for their bodies. So all plants, maybe they don't have muscle tissue, but the fibers that the plants are made out of, those fibers come from energy that is directly from the sun. So the sun is essentially the main source of all energy in the food chain, either directly or indirectly, because the sun feeds the plants, and the plants produce the fibers, and then animals eat the plants, and then there are animals that eat the animals that eat the plants, and so on and so forth. So we've established that producers are basically all animals or all organisms that are vegetative organisms, or basically plants. Plants are producers. Now, if you need to pause it, we are now going to go ahead into Interdependence Part 2, the PowerPoint titled Interdependence Part 2. We are going to go ahead and now move on to slide 2. You can pause this video if need be. We are now on slide 2 of Interdependence Part 2. The slide states, primary consumers. All food chains begin with producers, which serve as the baseline level of the food chain and provides food for all animals, either directly or indirectly. So producers provide food for all the animals, directly or indirectly. Primary consumers are animals that feed strictly on producers. All primary consumers eat vegetation and are thereby considered to be herbivores. Herbivores are animals that have a strict plant-based diet because their teeth and digestive tracts have evolved in such a way to break down vegetation and turn it into muscle tissue. So, let's take a look at cows, for example. Cows roam grass plains. Cows produce the best meat in the world, whether it's ribeye, T-bone steak, chopped meat, New York strip. All those different steaks that we eat, that we love, that are so good. Those steaks, that raw red meat, was created from plants, from grass. Cows have, I think, 3 or 4 chambered stomachs, or they have 3 stomachs, because they eat this grass all day long, and that's all they do is consume this grass, because the grass on the open plains, when the cows eat it, their body turns it into meat. And that meat tastes really, really good. But that just goes to show you how plants can indirectly feed your own self. Every time you eat a hamburger, you're really eating meat that was created from a plant, which was created its plant fibers from energy from the sun. So this is showing you kind of how that term food chain, the way I said that everything is linked together, how one thing affects the other and how it kind of goes up. You may pause this video if need be. We are now going to go ahead and move on to slide 3. We are now on slide 3. Okay, so slide 3 says, primary consumers are animals that eat vegetation. Although a grasshopper and a cricket are animals, excuse me, although a grasshopper and a deer are animals with a significant size difference, they both occupy the same level of the food chain. They are both herbivores, therefore they are both producers. So if you go ahead and look at the diagram, just give me 1 second here. If you go ahead and look at the diagram below, you are going to see a list of several different producers. As you can see, you have a deer there, you have a cricket, you have a rabbit, you have some type of squirrel or rodent over there, and then you also have a cardinal, okay? The idea here is that all of these animals, they're all different. Crickets are insects, the bird are avians, and the deer is a mammal. But they all eat vegetation. Doesn't matter their size difference. They are all still considered, in this instance, to be primary consumers in their respective food chain. Okay? The cricket is going to occupy a different ecological niche than a deer is. A deer is a larger animal. It covers more ground in terms of its territory. It migrates and all that. Crickets are very small. They stay in specific areas, but there still are established food chains in their ecosystems. Okay? And that is one thing that I want you to be able to understand, because remember that a food chain / food web, or a food web in this instance, is basically all the animals that live in a specific environment and what role they play in their environment. A deer's environment is slightly different than a grasshopper's, okay, because a deer has a much larger territory that it roams around. A grasshopper is a smaller animal. And although a deer can crush a grasshopper if it wanted to, they occupy different ecological niches. And that is one very important thing to understand, at least in terms of food web. You may pause this slide. We are now moving on to slide 4. We are now on slide 4. Secondary consumers. In any given food chain, the sun serves as the source of all energy, either directly or indirectly. Producers acquire their energy from the sun. Primary consumers feed strictly on the vegetative properties of the producers in order to build muscle tissue and feed their bodies. Secondary consumers feed strictly off of the primary consumers. In any food chain or food web, the secondary consumers are animals that consume the primary consumers. All secondary consumers are considered to be carnivores, and a carnivore is an animal that eats meat and flesh or other animals. So secondary consumers, they feed on other animals. That's it. They don't eat grass. They're not vegetarians. They're not omnivores. They only eat meat. You may pause this video. We are now moving on to slide 5.